All right, Mr. Chair, now you are live.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Terry Lomax. I'm the chair of the Maritime Advisory Board. This is our monthly meeting of May 2023. I'm just going to quickly go around and introduce. We have Alan Miller, who's a member of the board. We have Andy Fregley, who's a member of the board. Jake Iverson is not a member of the board, but is a welcome visitor and participant. Usually each month. Rita Wildley, member of the board. We have Clint Pratt from the Department of the Inspections and Permits section of Planning and Zoning, who's going to fill us in on one of the agenda items. We have Duncan Hood, member of the board. Stephen Rice from Economic Development. The Harbor Master, Beth Bellis. We have Mike Tomasini, a member of the board, and Mr. Allen, who got his invite belatedly, a member of the board. So with that, we will move right into Mr. Pratt, and Mr. Pratt is here to give us an update on the recurring issue that we've had on the agenda, which is the issue with stray electric current at Truxton Park. And without any further ado, I'll let Mr. Pratt tell us why there's stray electric and why we should avoid it and what we're going to do about it.
Well, it's not an uncommon thing, stray electrical current around marinas. This particular one happens to be the city of Annapolis property. And we've been dealing with the problem for an extensive amount of time. Presently, I have some test equipment that's installed, which is not normally installed in most marinas. I have several copper bus bars that are installed in the water. I have a test point where I can record data. And I've been monitoring the situation for an extended period of time. What I do is at the beginning of the season, based upon the values that I've obtained, I then make recommendations to the city manager, and we make a decision based upon that. In the interim, we've since this first I became aware of it, we have gone through infrastructure that relates to us first before we started pointing fingers to other entities. We made sure that our house was clean. We spent a fair amount of money going to that level, and we felt very comfortable. I felt very comfortable that we had done everything that we could possibly do related to the city of Annapolis. From a sense of other people that are involved or other, potential problems, we have a body of water, to point to emphatically say one area, there's one source, there's multiple sources. And that's kind of what we worked through. We worked through one problem at a time. And we've had a reduction overall, but we're still not, in my mind, at acceptable levels that I would in my mind, to advise the city manager that it was safe to say we can swim in that area.
So what is there, and I think it might've been somebody at the last meeting mentioned that one potential source of this was actually current traveling through the ground, I guess basically groundwater from somewhere farther away. Is that a viable explanation, or?
Well, you have natural occurring voltage gradients that occur in the earth naturally. I mean, when we deal with like a pool scenario, that we try to make everything at the same potential. And so there's no difference in touch potential. So if you have like a pool, we connect everything that's metallic, and we even ground the water. So it all ends up with the same potential. We've tried to use that same theory at Truxton Park to the best that we can in the area that that's city property, but the city doesn't own the water. We only allow people to use that facility. But once we became aware of the problem, we can't, with good standing, we have signs posted down there that says there's potentially stray current. It's not potentially in our area, it is there. And based upon how frequently it's there, that's the way we have to act at any given time. When you're around a marina, straight current, it's just a matter of, do you want to be at that percentage? Right now, for the month of April, we monitored for about 3 days, and the values, let me pull it up real quick. Just give me a second. I did a testing period from 4/12/2023, and it ended at 4/14/23. And the average value I had at one of the test points was 432 milliamps. The maximum value I had was 6.57 amps. Another test point, we're going to call it 2, I had 331 milliamps and a maximum value of 5.76 amps.
And
And
ask
last
a
place,
question.
Sure.
Hi. Are we talking AC or DC? And are you measuring voltage at the
this
same
is
time?
60 hertz. 60
60
hertz.
hertz. Okay. AC.
Definitely AC. And for the frequency. And then this is from a calibrated instrument. I was using a Power Pad 3, AMEC Power Pad 3 with test probes. Additionally, I used another testing instrument to spot test, an AMEC spot test component. And that test was conducted at 11:53 on the 12th. And I had a instantaneous reading of 1.6 amps and a voltage of 1.9 volts at that time.
And how far apart are your probes? Are they one on land and one out at the end of the pier kind of thing?
They're set all along at different locations. Some of them are submerged. Some of them are free floating. There's a fair amount of distance between the two, between the different probes, different distances.
Yeah. And when the amperage shoots up like that into the measurable, into the amps range, is it instantaneous, or is it gradually easing up and then back down again, or is it like a switch?
Well, we're using a trend data. So that period of time, it averaged, over that period of time. The values I gave you was for a period of time. And the average is based on that time frame. The one instantaneous value that I had was only measured at that one moment at that time.
Yeah.
But since the last time, I've recorded data for 6 months, a period of 6 months, and that average value, that's what I base my recommendations on.
So we have a couple of questions. We have Duncan Hood, who's a member, who's got his hand up first, and then I'll go to Alan Miller.
Great.
Sure.
Cliff, what is it? I'm afraid I just don't know. What is a dangerous, shockable, whatever level of amperage at 60?
I would tell you it's more or less what happens to the human body. All of us have different resistance values. My biggest concern is drownings that occur.
Yeah. And I
So
imagine that would be because
Go ahead.
I imagine that would be because it would numb or paralyze someone. And I kind of am asking, at what level would that begin to happen?
It's all different for every person. Every person is, so to say that if we were talking strictly on, I will give you an example. In your bathroom, those of you who live in a modern home, there is a GFCI device adjacent to your sink, Class A GFCI, and that trips anywhere between 4 and 6 milliamps, depending on the age of it.
No.
Milliamps.
Yeah.
Okay, now modern marinas that are under the current electrical code, not what we have in the city of Annapolis right now, but I'm speaking of the 2023 NEC or the 2017 NEC, like a shore power receptacle outlet would be set to trip at 30 milliamps. And then we would have protection on the overall feeder that protects the marina itself trip at 100 milliamps. So that kind of gives you an idea of what values that I'm telling you in comparison.
Yeah, so when you talk about being between 6 and 5 as your high end, that's a heck of a lot of current.
Well, again, that's for shock components. Now, what we have set up at our location, we've done the best that we could to treat it like a swimming pool. So what we're trying to do is make everything at the same touch potential. So all of our metallic rails, everything metallic on the pier is all got the same touch potential. Everything's been completely bonded. And then the water itself with the copper plates gets it at the same potential. It provides us with some protection adjacent.
So Mr. Miller had a question, I think.
Hey, Clint, can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Miller.
Hey, thanks for the work. I appreciate it. Just two questions. You said the word reduction earlier. Reduction in values, just how did that happen, or was that a rule out effect? And then you said you were kind of starting with, if I understood it right, sources and had ruled out the city. Does that mean you have sources that you're looking at and ruling one at a time? What does that mean?
When I first became involved with the problem that started from a complaint from a citizen, I first got involved with that. We went down and we looked at the potential sources, and we determined that we had problems. Our electrical infrastructure had problems. We went after that first and foremost, primarily. We spent money to mitigate those values, and where we were comfortable, we had resolved it. Once we had resolved that component, then we went one at a time. We went to the utility company, Baltimore Gas and Electric. And Baltimore Gas and Electric spent a lot of resources and went through their systems and see what they could do to make the reduction. But when you can't isolate every system that's in that body of water, we go after what we have, where we know of, our property specifically.
So I take it from that, if you haven't gone and I'm, if I remember the layout of that little creek that goes up there, kind of the arm off of Spa Creek, there's a group of apartments / condos immediately adjacent to the, I guess would be the southeast of the Truxton boat ramp. Has there been any contact with them to see if their measurements over there are higher, such that might include that as a the source, or eliminate it if they were lower?
Well, maybe you should speak to the harbor master, Beth Bellis, if she's sitting here.
She's on here with us.
Beth actually got on their property, and maybe Beth can. I can't speak for Beth.
So we did go on to Spa Cove Apartments, and we did notice that there was a light post where the light was missing and wires were dangling into the water. We alerted folks to that, but there wasn't much that we could do about that. So in terms of our role at the Harbor Master's office, there isn't a lot left for us to do. I think based on what I'm hearing from Mr. Pratt and what I'm understanding from the trends in safe practices around marinas, which are defined, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Clint, as any area that has more than 3 outlets, there just shouldn't be swimming in these areas anymore, because experts have decided that many of these drownings that where people said, oh, he was such a strong swimmer, we don't know why he drowned, were probably from stray electrical current. So unfortunately, it's up to the administration to decide what to do. And I'm sure Mr. Pratt will continue to feed them the information they request. But I don't know that there's going to come a time when we say, if we do this, this, and this, if we check this, and this, then there will come a time where it will be safe to swim around a marina. Because from what I'm hearing from leading experts is that's just not really true anymore.
So with that, then that comes back around to, we know there's a note, and maybe I'll direct this back to Clint Pratt, is that, you know, we ban swimming. Do we then ban kayaks? Do we then ban paddle boards? I mean, where, at what level do we stop banning and say it's okay for certain uses? I mean, obviously you can still launch a boat there because you're inside your boat. Theoretically, although having launched my boat there, I wind up stepping on the tongue in the water anyway. It's pretty hard not to, but it depends on the size of the boat. But where do we draw the line on what we should ban and not ban?
Again, we are a self-insured organization. A self-insured organization. We have a risk assessment team. We've got a legal department, and that's where it comes down to. Now, what insurance companies that insure private marinas and utilities, they're telling them the same thing. Post the signs under the National Electrical Code now. We've got to post the signs that says potential straight current. Now, with our thinking, our marina is a little different. We use floating docks, and our boats typically aren't in the water all the time. They pull up, they're pulled above, they're on a plastic insulator. So we're a little different related to that. We looked at us first. We looked at our problems first. And that's how I've always dealt with it, is let's make sure our house is clean before we go pointing fingers in other directions. And we've thoroughly done so. We vetted that out carefully.
All right, so Andy?
Or Beth, you want to go ahead first?
Sure. I mean, I think I agree with Clint. This entirely needs to be a decision made by our risk manager and our legal team. But what I think is important to point out to citizens and to this team as well is that when we launch a boat, maybe our feet are in the water, but a sit on top kayak and a stand-up paddleboard are designed in such a manner that it's likely that you will fall overboard. So if I get shocked between my ankle and my knee, I'm not going to seize that fall into the water and immediately drown at lower levels. And Clint might be able to speak to this more. But if I fall into the water completely, that's when the electric shock drownings occur. If you spend some time on the website, you would understand the difference. So it's going to be up to the risk assessors, and it's going to be up to the attorneys to decide where we feel comfortable.
So that's Andy.
Oh, just a point. The risk potential is significantly greater in freshwater than in saltwater. The proximity to which you have to be near a fault to be part of the conducting chain is a whole lot less. It's a whole lot closer in saltwater than it is in freshwater. And these cases that have attracted a lot of national attention are almost, I believe, they're all in lakes and rivers inland. It would seem to me that it'd be logical to have a moment when test equipment could be set up and the power could get shut off to the entire other marinas that are in proximity to the Truxton Park. But it's not my power to say anybody should or needs to do anything, but you would have an immediate measurable difference. You would have something to point at. I don't know whether that's been discussed.
Again, everybody's got different opinions in a lot of different areas, and we look at our different expertise that we've had. We've had a pretty good partnership with the utility company, and there's been periods of time where we've had the feeders shut off to that a particular apartment complex, not intentionally, but it was, and we were there able to get some readings, some recordings why that marina was shut down.
Was there any significant difference?
Negative.
Okay.
There.
Great.
All right, so at this point, I guess, Beth, the city's ban, for lack of a better word, on swimming, kayaks, and paddleboards is simply in place.
That decision is entirely left with our administration and our Office of Law.
So nothing, is anything in place other than a sign?
Technically, people have been told that they cannot kayak They cannot stand up paddleboard and they cannot swim in that area.
Okay, and other than, and you're gonna have those that don't take that and then ignore it, and you're gonna have those that do obey it. And what, if any, I'll call it complaints or feedback have you gotten from the paddle boarders, in particular paddle boarders and kayakers, about not being recommended to launch at Truxton Park? I mean, are they up in arms and carrying pitchforks and torches, or are they just gone somewhere else?
I think for the most part, they've gone somewhere else. I think
Okay.
Amos Garrett has become more popular. There's some other spots, but I do want to take just 1 minute. I know Duncan wants to say something. I think Andy's point is really valid about the difference between salt and fresh water. And I've done plenty of reading on that the difficulty is it's twofold. It's what Clint said. There are different opinions and the experts are not entirely in line. And also the extent to which Truxton is fresh or salt water varies based on rainfall and season.
Okay.
Very true. The
Duncan.
environmental conditions change daily, weekly. So that level, that's a concern. We're not totally freshwater by any means.
Yeah, we're brackish water. So the question, another question that comes up, because we have launch points throughout the city. We've been talking about Truxton because that's the one that's been reported. Do you have any other reports, for example, Back Creek, for example, Weems Creek, of this problem, or is it mostly centered at Truxton?
I
Who are you
Right.
speaking to, me or Beth?
Well, we'll start
Wide
with
open. You guys can arm wrestle for the answer.
Clint.
So I'll start. We did have a complaint. I think, if my memory serves me, it might have come from a citizen contacted U.S. Coast Guard, and I think it was off of EYC. I think I filtered that complaint up and said, is anyone aware of this? And I don't recall ever hearing any follow-up or response on that. Maybe different, Clint.
No, I don't have anything formally related to that in writing. Again, our primary role as what I do is the electrical inspector for the city of Annapolis, is construction related, new buildings, existing buildings. I follow up on complaints, but my full-time job, is not monitoring current in the water.
All right, anybody else have anything, or shall we let Alan and then Scott and then Andy? Boy, we're Alan, go ahead.
Hey guys, just sorry I have two screens. Just want to bring it up. The City of Annapolis website, which I just pulled up, advertises, please come launch your kayaks at Truxton Park. When I go to kayak.com, it says kayaks and paddle boards are great, and I quote, great to launch from Truxton Park because you have good places to park. So again, I'm not Andy, I'm not Patrick, but it's on the website to come down there and launch kayaks. I'm looking at it right now. So there's a disconnect somewhere. I think that's something we might ought to bring up.
Who did I say was next? Scott. And then
Yes,
Andy.
thank you, Terry. Clint, it's just a question, and maybe for the Maritime Advisory Board, would it be worth having for the, I call them private mariners or anybody that has a dock with power on it, to have an annual inspection by the city? To just, Beth found wires hanging in the water. I'm not sure that's her job to do that. And I know that the fire marshal checks things once a year in buildings in Annapolis, and probably, but you probably do that with electrical. Would it be worth recommending to the city to have maybe an annual inspection of the, we can call them marinas or piers that have electricity, whether they're private homes or an apartment complex, on an annual basis, just to perhaps preempt spikes in voltages or a wire that's fallen off, like Beth found, or some lack of maintenance on an electrical basis. If it's in your house, you can burn your house down maybe, but in the water, you can kill people. So just a thought from the Maritime Advisory Board standpoint, should there be a recommendation to the city, maybe an annual inspection on piers, I guess, whether they're hooked to a house or to an apartment complex, just to maybe mitigate some of these risks. That was my thought.
If you.
Would you like a rebuttal or just? I'm just.
No, I can see the logistics of telling private homeowners in particular that you're going to be subjected to an annual inspection of your pier.
Yeah.
But it does raise the question, and I'll pose with Clint, is on properties that you do inspect because they're like an apartment building that they undergo regular inspections for health, et cetera, as part of their license. Would those units that happen to be associated with that have marinas, would it be an undue burden that the city would also look at their marina operation during the course of those regular inspections for for their licenses?
Typically, my role is primarily when we rebuild a marina, an existing marina, and then we're going to upgrade that existing marina to the code that is in place at that time. Existing circumstances, it's the responsibility of the property owner. It's the responsibility of the marina owner. The liability falls on that marina owner. But it's just a matter of resources. It's just a matter of the additional people and the staffing and how you would manage that particular component. I mean, you're the Maritime Board. You know how many marinas, how many maritime properties that we have in the city of Annapolis. And I've been in this jurisdiction for 30 years. And when we had worked with the marinas initially, we were getting accused of overreach to the maritime industry and that we were hurting the maritime industry. That's come through at different times in my career. There's a fine line.
Beth.
And I would just say quickly, if you go to the website electricshockdrowning.org, a lot of the experts would say there isn't any mitigating swimming around power currents. What they would say is there are municipalities that have installed like a detector, and they have done all of this work to mitigate. But essentially, as Clint has illustrated, these things can change, and so we shouldn't be swimming near boats or near marinas, which are defined as, like, I think 3 electrical outlets. So as much as we want to mitigate it and fix it, I think that the thinking has changed, and we might need to change our thinking.
All right. Anybody else before we let Mr. Tomasini?
So my question is for Andy. Being an electrical person, Andy, is it likely that the current in the water at Truxton is caused by something that's happening at Shearwater? Would it spread that far?
Oh, that's an impossible question to answer, but I'd say that since they've eliminated possibilities closer to home, that would be something to look at. 6.75 amps is a lot of current.
Yeah.
A whole lot of current, and that's something that would surely hurt somebody if they was in close proximity to somebody. My point that I was raising my hand about was that if you want to know about stray current around the Annapolis area, all you got to do is talk to Lee at Harbor Diving or Mike Haskell at Harbor Diving or Lee at Diver Down. Those guys know where all the hot docks are, and they know where not to avoid. They try to unplug boats before they go on them to dive, but some problems are directly boat miswiring, feeding power right into the water, usually causing pretty aggressive stray current issues. And stray current issues are just a telltale of stray current, of course, but it's the same. It's two different problems with the same situation. And dropped dock wires, classic problem. And those wires will probably eventually corrode themselves off to the high water mark. But in the meantime, they're dumping power into the water, and it could be happening anywhere. But in my experience, it's usually in pretty relatively close proximity. I've seen it traveling 100 feet. I haven't hardly ever seen it traveling farther than that in a measurable, not this kind of measurement.
And then at Truxton, there's a lot of waterfront. How hard is it, Clint, to place other detection sites along that waterfront, say to the right side of the boat ramp as you're looking at it, or over to the left near the kind of like the point of the park? Is that something that's feasible, or is that something that can't be done?
We have test probes right adjacent to the wood structure on the boat ramp, right there on that location. And we have them on our floating dock. We have them in the water at different locations, and they vary at different times. But as an average, the plate that's located right adjacent to the boat launching ramp has been the lowest value in general terms. That's what I would tell you. Now, I've made several recommendations to the administration, but they are capital improvement projects of that level, that magnitude. So it's all about funding. Everything that you have stated here at all, it's just funding. There's different funding sources. I made recommendations. It's just to get it funded, and can we fund it to do some of the mitigation techniques.
All right, anything else?
But would that, yeah,
Oh, wait a minute, we got Mike and
This is
Andy,
the-
or
this is
Alan,
just-
I mean.
I bumped Alan on purpose. So from a funding perspective, and I guess this would be my thing, because we're in budget season now, and we should be talking about this. Is this something that falls under your budget, Beth, or is it something that falls under P and Z, or does it fall under Rec and Parks? Like, if we're talking-
CIP project, the acronym is Capital Improvement Project. Capital Improvement Project.
that's a whole separate budget.
A separate budget altogether. It's something trying to do that wouldn't come out of either one of our budgets. We don't have any budget for that. And Mike, you know, recently I saw you out where you're adjacent to Cardi Templeton's location, correct? You have your boat dock there, and you saw me out there where you read that particular facility, and you saw what goes on to redo that facility. You were there witnessing it 5 days a week.
Alan? You're mute. Unmute.
How about now?
There you go.
Okay. Yeah, sorry, broken record. Obviously will be solved or won't be solved. It'll take some time. I just recommend that I think we make some kind of recommendation to somebody to say, at least take it off the official website where we say kayaking is okay, because that will get us in trouble really, really quickly. I'm an avid kayaker, trained it, all that stuff. Every website I hear or I've touched here in the last 5 minutes says Truxton Park is a good place to launch kayaks from. So we should change the city website first, and then hopefully the other ones will come along. Just 2 cents.
Agreed.
Good point. All right, I'm gonna preempt any more questions until Mr. Pratt can go get dinner.
That's fair enough. I'm sorry I couldn't come speak to you earlier, but again,
Fine. We
Yeah,
may
just
call
wanted to
upon
make-
you again,
I
or if you
wanted to
get
make sure I
changed.
could give you some, wanted to answer some questions, kind of tell you where we're at with it. That's really what I'm here today.
And as you get, and if you get any updates, either pass them on to Beth, or you now have my email address. You can just pass them on to me, and I'll follow up with the board, or as we. I mean, this has been going on for a year now, so it's not like it's it's just been a recurring item on the agenda. But it's very good to get a more thorough update on what's been done and what the results are. So I appreciate you joining us this evening. So go enjoy.
Here.
Thank you.
All right, let's move on to the balance of the rest of the regular agenda. Everybody got a copy of the April 2000 meeting or 2003 meeting minutes. Were there any changes or corrections to those minutes? In fact, I don't see, interestingly, I don't see Kimberly, so hopefully this is being
Yeah.
recorded. So she'll be able to pick up on that. Just dawned on me. Hi, Peter. Is there a motion to adopt the April 2003 minutes as presented?
So moved.
Hood says, nodded his head. Ms. Goslin seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. The next person that I think I'll just take, I think it is in order, Mr. Rice.
Good to see everyone. Let's see here. From the Economic Development Office, the city's commercial vacancy rate for April is 6.2%. During the months of March and April, we had 4 new businesses open in the city, 3 expanding or relocating, and 1 business changed ownership. We provided assistance to 20 businesses last month. And of course, we launched our seasonal parklet program on April 17th. We have 2 parklets that have been approved. We have 1 that's actually in operation. We've been spending a lot of time actually working on the economic development budget and the planning and zoning budget last month and this month as well. We're also helping to plan the reopening of Hillman Garage, which will be next month. And on the maritime reporting front, my second letter and follow-ups have generated a few more responses. We have 15 properties that have responded. So we're about a third of the way with our reporting. I still have more work to do on that front. Let's see here. The Annapolis Blues, which is the new soccer team, kicked off their preseason friendly on the 11th. And actually, I'm sorry, this was on the 10th. And there were 4,000 fans at Navy Marine Corps Stadium. It was a very nice event. I'm really excited. The next game is June 3rd. That's the real home opener. And we also had a speed lending event with the Small Business Administration and the Small Business Development Center. That was held at Pitt Moyer on the 11th.
All right. Lots of things going on. It was very interesting to hear that even for a preseason game, that was 4,000 fans is a nice number. Mike.
And the team is doing a lot of outreach too. They came out to Eastport Elementary School today and did a after school clinic for the kids there and took photos with the kids, and so they're really trying to make themselves a part of the community, which is a real positive.
That is.
Thanks, Jake, if you're here. Yep. And then Stephen, you said a handful of new businesses opened. I saw somebody occupying the space that was the pie shop, but I didn't see any signs outside. Is that one of the new businesses? And if so, what is it?
Which shop? I'm sorry.
The Dangerously Delicious Pies shop. I know that space was vacant. It's just down by past Lighthouse Bistro.
Right. Let me check on that. I don't recall, but I know that there's been some activity. But yeah, I'll circle back.
All right. Anything else for Stephen? All right, Stephen, thank you. And as they say in the legal, this witness may be excused. Beth, there's a couple of any update on street in parks and the charter dock leases and usage.
So can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, so I just have a couple of updates. The street and parks, my update is that I have no updates. I don't believe Cheston begun construction. They were due to begin mid-May, so hopefully any day now. So the information I distributed to the team is current and correct. With regard, do you want me to keep going, Terry?
Sure. Yeah, just go roll right into the charter doc and what's
Okay.
happening there. And
Okay, so the update on the charter doc is that as of today, we have 107 charter bookings. Only 5 were canceled. Twice a group tried to book, but there was a conflict with an existing charter. This is a new phenomenon, and it's, I think, illustrative of the increasing competition in the charter field. And at the same time, in 2022, we received 89 charter bookings, which I have to do the math, but that's I don't know, 15-ish% increase in charters.
all right. Any questions on either of those for Beth at this point? All right, we're rolling. Scott, you're on mute.
Sorry to interrupt. I've noticed that a couple of the American Cruise Line ships have come in, which is great. And when they land people, this is just my ignorance, but when they land people to come into the city, do they have to book the charter dock, or can they just drop people off at the city dock somewhere?
They book the charter dock because they're commercial, and they actually pay for the entire day because they would like to come and go at will. So they definitely pay their fair fees.
But they don't land their whole ship. They land one of their 40.
They
or 50
land their
ones.
tender every single day except for New Year's Day. On New Year's Day, we try to accommodate the big boat because we can.
Right, but they book their landings at the charter dock is my question. So thank you.
They do, yep, yes they do.
Actually, Beth, one other, are there any changes in what's happening for Blue Angels in terms of the exclusion zones? I think we've been using a commercial zone set up. Any change to that aspect of the Blue Angels?
No, I don't think so. I mean, everyone has submitted their requests. We have passed those on to the United States Coast Guard. They are the ultimate deciders of who gets the commercial vessel privilege or not. We don't use the placards anymore. We don't need to because we just have a list of who's allowed in and who's not.
All right.
So it's going smoothly. It's same as it ever was.
Good. All right. I think that does everything with Beth.
Did you want commercial leases covered or you want to defer?
You can go ahead and cover them.
So I saw in the last minutes that you deferred commercial leases. Does the group want to know like what the status is of the current leases?
Are you,
Yeah, I'd kind of like to hear what's going on there. Yeah.
Okay, so the city has extended 2 groups for 2 weeks per month for each of the months of April through August. Those leases were approved by city council, and other groups have expressed interest but have not retained, well, only one other has retained a sponsor. So the Wilma Lee has 10 weeks at the Long Dock on otherwise known as the Bertus Dock. And I think he calls himself DTA Party Boat or Party Boat downtown Annapolis has 10 weeks on the DNR dock, which we're probably going to start calling the Naval Academy dock. So it's the dock just adjacent to the DNR dock. And the way that we figured out how to, so I think this is important for this group because if you haven't already, you're going to be receiving another lease to review, compliments of the council. So the way that we determined how much to charge them is we took the revenue from the charter dock because we wanted to compare apples to apples, so commercial to commercial. Took the revenue from the charter dock from 2022 for the entire year, and we charged half that amount because the boats only get half of the usable weeks. And then we took the length of the vessel also into consideration. And then we added some minor fees for electric and trash removal. So I can give those concrete numbers if people want them. But essentially, just to spitball it, just to let people know what it looks like, the Wilma Lee is paying roughly $3,000 a month for 2 weeks time there. And then my update on this information as of today, Alderman Chandelmeyer has sponsored a lease for Chesapeake Nautical Cruises, which has been heard by first reader. And the other two leases they suspended the rules and they approved both leases the same night they were heard, but for this one, they did not. And it feels like the city council is kind of dialing back and going, hold on, wait a minute, let's look at a broader picture. And they want the Maritime Advisory Board to weigh in on this as well as some other stuff.
That has not, there's not been a referral to us. Maybe it'll, so we don't have it on it's why it's not on the agenda, because we've had nothing referred to us by way of leases or anything. If they want to do that, they need to get who is it, Jack, what used to be Jackie, but whoever's going to pass on the referrals needs to.
I'll definitely send an email, but it was Rob Savage's specific request and I will pass that on.
Okay. Yeah, I just hadn't seen anything, that's all. All right.
Tara, you've got two people with their hands up.
Oh, well, then I got, well, see, that little hand that Jake uses, I don't, don't pay attention. I've overlooked that all the time. There you go. That's much better. We'll take Jake first.
Ashley has hers up
Thank
too.
you.
Yeah, we're getting there.
I will lower it. But it goes back to a couple minutes ago when we were talking about ACL coming into town. Blue Angels, I'm just curious, do they have a specific dock that they're going to be coming to during Blue Angels? And I asked the question because in the past couple of years, they have tried to use the charter dock and the charter dock is fully booked, almost to the minute. So basically the question is, where is that tender supposed to go when they arrive?
The tender is supposed to go on the charter dock. So if it's gone somewhere else, I wasn't aware and it's not permitted. And as far as I know, I've been looking pretty closely at the charters. That's why some groups have decided they don't want to book because there's too much conflict. But I don't think there shouldn't be any conflict. Now, as I say that, Jake, they have it booked from 7 to 5. They understand and they've been told that if the Raven has a 45-minute booking, they don't get to come then. They have to wait. They should know that. So if there's a problem, I will iron that out with American Cruise Lines.
Yeah, I feel like maybe the disconnect is, they come into the dock and they have every intention of leaving on time. Some of those passengers are limited by mobility, so it's tough for them to get off the dock and to make our schedules work. So
I agree. I think the long-term solution for some of this is to have a set section of the long dock or the Vertis dock where smaller vessels can charter and come and go and not hog up where these big commercial boats, because it's not an easy space to share. And that's what I'm hoping will ultimately happen, but I have to get some supporters of that idea.
I think that's a great idea.
So I take it from what you have said is that if there is a conflict with a booked charter and American Cruise Lines, even though they have quote booked, that they should wait until the time booked charter clears before they come in.
Yes, and I've met with them. I met with them in person multiple times this year, and I've encouraged them to have their captains speak to me on Channel 17. And I think the administration hears me, but they haven't passed. The captains aren't talking to me.
Will you have somebody down there at the dock those 2 days, shooing them out when it's time for somebody else who has booked it to come in?
We'll definitely try our best. Obviously, we're running in every different direction, but yeah, we'll work on that and try to. And you know what? Instead of shoo them out, I'm going to try to reach out to them ahead of time and say, "Hey, listen, let's make sure this works smoothly."
It's a pretty crazy day, 2 days anyway, and to have that uncertainty just creates risk for everybody.
on that day alone, minutes mean everything. So minutes just mean a lot. So
I'll connect with them this week and make sure we get this straight.
thank you.
All right. Thank you, Beth. All right, any other questions? All right.
Ashley has her-
Ashley has her hand up.
Oh,
It's not big. I was just gonna say the new spot that for Dangerous Silly Delicious is a restaurant called Leo Annapolis.
Ashley, I'm sorry, you,
Thanks, Ashley.
you don't come up on my screen, so
No.
all of a sudden you pop up when you say something. So I can't see your, I don't know why I can't see your, I don't know
It's
what's,
no big deal. I was mostly just listening, but I was gonna tell you that that new business that up on West Street is called Leo Annapolis. It's a new restaurant.
Leo?
Yeah, as in like Leo the lion type thing,
Oh,
or
okay.
Yeah. Hey, Ashley.
Mhm.
There we go. I know, I just realized what the issue was. Okay. I'm
Good.
now showing the non-video participants. So welcome, Ashley. Welcome, Kimberly.
Nice job, Terry. Hey, Ashley,
Well, I was
Do
in
you have
I
any-
was in an arbitration all day on Zoom and we were hiding the non-video participants. And then I never forgot to take that feature off, turn it off. So now I have everybody. Thank you.
totally got it. Hey, Ashley, do you have any sense of why the Lighthouse restaurant is closed so much? Is it something that they're having trouble with, or what's going on?
Oh, I mean, I don't know personally. I don't have any connection with them. I'm guessing though, but they're connected with the Lighthouse Shelter, so it just might be how they staff with because they're set up as a different restaurant model than like a traditional model. So it might just be how their model is set up.
Okay.
Are you talking about the bistro, Duncan?
Mhm.
on West Street?
The one on West Street,
Yeah. They're doing primarily private events in the evening now.
is that right?
But yeah, just due to their business plan and financial issues.
Gotcha. Thank you very much.
Okay. Mike.
Yeah, well, we still have Beth, I think. The project at the Naval Academy that's going on right now, are they halting that for Blue Angels and moving that equipment out of there? Or
They are. They wanted to Curtis Basin. We obviously told them no, absolutely not. So yeah, I don't know too much about that project, but they are halting it for Blue Angels and they are moving the equipment.
Isn't that part of their raising the seawall project?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, they just started on the corner. I just noticed it when I was on the water the other day, but that's a lot of equipment and a lot of work going on there.
It is. I wish I knew more about what they're doing.
I guess we'll see it evolve.
Well, you probably saw the condition of the steel infrastructure on that wall the other day, Terry. It's a mess. Just a
Oh, I'm
mess.
sure. I don't think it's been touched since it was built.
Yeah, I'm sure you're right.
Okay, let's backtrack to Alan. Was there an MAIB meeting in April? Might not have been.
Nope, I don't think so. Not in April.
All right. And Mike, you're on the hook for May, but I'm not sure there's a meeting then or not. So just check.
there is not. I got lucky.
Okay.
Or unlucky. It could be either way. But
Unlucky.
I reached out to Ham, Cheney, and they do not meet in May. So whoever's on deck for June, you get the bulk of the meeting.
That would probably be Peter Trogdon if my ABCs are correct, but I'll make a note of it for next time. All right, Alan, Scott and Alan, any update on the other than the pricing that you already gave us for the potential signage? And I take it neither of you heard from Ellen Moyer.
Alan and I have spoken a little bit on that, and I had a call into Ellen Moyer and hadn't heard back. And this week I had a good conversation with Alice Estrada at the Maritime Museum, and we're going to set up a meeting with her. I think they're obligated this week or at least through Thursday. So she's going to contact us, but she seemed receptive to the idea that the Maritime Museum possibly could be the home of the Maritime Hall of Fame and explore ideas. I think it would be good to have, input and ideas from the board for anybody's comments of what their vision would be for this, and we can float those at the meetings with Alice and other people. And if Ellen has ideas, I just haven't heard what they are. And I saw her last month and called her and left a message, but she must be out of town or something. And, yes.
You guys, you and Alan have been talking about a trail type of museum. Are you talking to Alice about actually having a location at their facility? Is that what you're talking about?
Both all ideas are open, and Alan Miller had the idea of the trail and the signs, which I think is great. But first of all, you've got to have the functioning operation of whether there's a board or a selection committee or a home, things like that, which could be at the museum, and maybe mission statement, bylaws, things like that. So somebody needs to develop that, and we're taking the idea and giving it to the Maritime Museum and see what they might be able to do. And we in our discussions with Terry and Alan is the Maritime Advisory Board shouldn't be the purveyor of this, and the selection board, everything should not be the Maritime Advisory Board. We're above that position, but we're trying to find the organization that can do that and get the ideas out there that can make it happen. And I think Alan's ideas for the signs are great. Other people on the board, if you have ideas what you vision this to be, please email us and let us know, and we can fly those by. And
so Ellen Moyer, I mean, this goes back a year now when I met with her, was somewhat along the lines of the Sailing Hall of Fame model, which you have in terms of selections. At least you'd have several inductees each year, an initial set of inductees, which would then translate into the signage or some type of it's not really a promotion, some type of a static display program, whatever, at the Maritime Museum or at some location.
right.
I don't think the vision was much beyond that. I mean, the Maritime Museum already does a lot of has a lot of things about the maritime history and heritage and things like that. And I think that the goal would be just to focus on individuals in Maryland who contributed to the industry, not necessarily just the sailing, not just sailing, not just watermen, but everything from boat builders to whatever else might be.
Absolutely, yeah. That's the idea, and we understand that from Ellen Moyer. But I think there needs to be whether it's a selection board or a board that monitors it, and under whose wing is this? And this board could be under the Maritime Museum's wing, but also they could help produce things, that's paperwork or websites, things like that, and then the signs that Alan has an idea who would be responsible for that. So museum is a somewhat natural place for these kinds of functions, but it would need to get an organization need to get set up, and we can give ideas, and hopefully the museum would take it. And it may be that initially the selection would get a half dozen people in there, and then maybe after that 2 per year, or a bigger number initially, and then so many more yearly after that. And that's something that the board and selection committee could decide under the Maritime Museum's auspices if that's what they want to take on.
But I think it's a pretty good idea, Scott. But one thing that we don't want to do, I don't think, is end up in a situation like the Hall of Fame where it was so specialized that nobody really cared about it. And I think you've addressed that by having a widespread board and a wider net than just sailing people. And so you're
absolutely. And I think the initial idea was way more than sailing. Obviously, sailing is a big thing in Annapolis, but there's a lot more maritime things going on, from marina operators to watermen to lots of other things that I don't even know about. But
well, I certainly agree with you on that. Thank you.
All
Anyway,
right,
Alan's got
Um,
some good ideas, so we'll keep working on it.
all right, and we'll just keep it on the agenda and for updates. All right, there's one item of new business that's not on here, and so but because it just came to my attention, and that is there is a bill currently before, or actually, I think might be first reader, or actually, you can correct me. It's 01523, and 01523 is a change in a zoning change, or not a zoning change, but it's under the purview of zoning, so to speak. And it applies only to the floodplain, the designated floodplain area around City Dock, which basically extends in towards the market and across Susan Campbell Park and along, I don't know if it goes into Prince George Street, it probably does, the lower end of Prince George Street. And what it seeks to adjust is basically the starting point for measuring height. So right now, and I'm going to pick a number, and I might have the wrong number, and the actual number is a little less relevant to the conversation. But let's say the height limitation around City Dock on the buildings, the Harbor Master Building, whatever, is 36 feet. I'm picking a number. The City Dock is being raised because of resiliency, and it's going up somewhere from, and I've heard everything from 4 to 7 feet. If you don't, but the measurement of the 36 feet is from the current level of City Dock. So if you raise City Dock 6 feet and your height is 36 feet, you now have a 30-foot height building, which is a one-story building, or 2 versus 3, whatever the numbers turn out to be. And you have essentially shortened the potential for any of the buildings as they're rebuilt along City Dock. And that includes the Maritime Welcome Center that is to replace the facility for the where the current bathhouse slash toilets are on City Dock next to the Harbor Master's office. And the current plan and the City Dock Action Committee envisioned that building to be showers, heads, sort of a meeting room isn't the right word, but an area, sort of gathering space, and an area for that could display some maritime heritage, City Dock heritage, et cetera. And the planning for that anticipated a 2-story building, but if you don't, adjacent to the Burtis House. However, if you don't raise the starting point on City Dock, which 01523 does, or proposes to do, you now have cut the building down to a 1-story building. And so I got a call about literally this afternoon about would the MAB weigh in on the need for that ordinance. Because it has not been referred to us and because it was not on the agenda, I'm not comfortable in calling for a vote or anything like that. But what I do propose to do, and not making doing an official report, but what I would propose to do is a letter to the Planning Commission on MAB letterhead, simply expressing our position regarding raising, approving the approval of raising the baseline, so to speak. And I did go back, I took a few minutes before this meeting, I did go back to the City Dock Action Plan, and there were 3 points that were foci, I guess is the right word, that were in that plan about what that facility or what the concept was. One is to be a building that encourages and welcomes visitors from the water, also welcomes visitors from the land that want to interact with the water, and also be a facility or a goal of displaying the heritage. And so would propose to write a letter, which I would just circulate tomorrow for the board, but to write a letter, a presentation to the Planning Commission on their Thursday meeting, nothing like a short time frame, that expresses the sentiment as opposed to the vote of the board. And I'll throw it open to see if anybody has any strong feelings, particularly not to do that. But your thoughts, Duncan?
Yeah, it just seems to make sense to raise the permissible height, the amount that the dock is raised. So my question really is, are we talking about really a wall, or are we talking about bringing the land up, leaving the existing buildings basically in a little moat? Is that what we're talking about?
I don't know. Certainly, if you bring the land up and you don't raise the physical buildings, now the Burtis house is already scheduled to be raised.
Yeah.
Raised means
R-A-Z-E-D?
elevated.
R-A-Z-E-D?
Not R-A-Z, to be elevated. And that would then also mean that the adjacent building would be elevated. How this impacts, or whether there's a moat, or that's actually almost an upside down, where the high point, where the upside down moat would affect the actual physical buildings that line there, the latitude 38 or whatever the restaurant is, and those 2 or 3 other buildings.
Well, that's exactly the problem, isn't it? Yeah.
I mean, they're going to have to deal with the sea level rise at some point, and already do. But my focus was just on that yes, we would want it to be raised in order to accommodate what we'd envision to be the Welcome Center, Maritime Welcome Center on City Dock.
Well, it's certainly the way I feel. Anyway.
Rita.
So does this just apply to public buildings, or does it apply to commercial buildings as well?
It would apply, as I understand it, and I have not read the ordinance, other than the heading that says to raise that baseline, basically. But it would apply to anything within that floodplain zone. And I think you can go online and look at 1523, and there's probably a map to what that area is. But I'm assuming that it would include any of the buildings along that typically get the flooding already. And we know along Dock Street and along Prince George Street, it would likely include those buildings. Now, it wouldn't force them to raise, but if they wanted to, they needed to rebuild, it would move their starting point up with everybody else.
Well, my concern is that if there's no defined height included in our letter, then would it appear that we would endorse a 10-story hotel?
No.
At some point.
All we're endorsing is, we're not endorsing any change in the height. We're endorsing the change in the starting point for the height. So the height would stay the same. It's just that the starting point would be raised up.
Terry, do we know how many feet that is? And is that tied to a FEMA number?
It is tied to a FEMA number, as my understanding. It's tied to a FEMA number, and I think it's 7 feet.
7 feet.
And I think
we had talked about 2 a couple of years ago.
Well, and I don't have the ordinance in front of me. The ordinance, I believe, is tied to the FEMA criteria.
And that's interesting. At our house on Mill Creek, they've just taken us out of the floodplain, and we're pretty darn close to the beach. But you've answered the question by saying you haven't read it yet, so it would be good for us to all read that before we sign off on the letter.
Yeah. It's 1523, and literally I would have circulated it, but I get a call at 6 o'clock tonight. Scott.
My guess is that in the city code, these heights are all based upon measurements above ground level. I don't know what term they might have, but it's probably ground level. And I don't think it's our job, but the definition of these numbers that are going on at the city dock of FEMA, whatever, raising these up, it seems like the city could establish a new ground level term, which the U.S. Geological Survey would probably have eventually as a ground level, and then it would be simple. They could keep the same heights, but if the city could define what the new ground level is, then everybody can live by that.
In effect, that's what this does or tries to do. Because, for example, the code is not as black and white as you would think it would be, but because it's from the existing grade, and people who have regraded over years or done other things in their yards. I mean, this happens all over Eastport all the time. Is, you know, what it's what is it, 28 feet, but where do you start? You know, somehow my house is actually built up from the sidewalk by 2 feet, but that's my existing grade. The house, you know, 2 doors down is 2 feet lower. So it's from existing grade. There's not a fixed datum that's elevation, you know, 42 from sea level.
Yeah, if the city can reestablish the existing grade or ground level at the city dock, then everything's much more.
It's my understanding that
easier.
the dock itself will not be raised, only the, you know, Susan Campbell Park and the land.
Right. But
the city probably can
Maritime,
establish what that number is.
But the Birders House and the Maritime Welcome Center sit on that raised portion.
Yes.
If they don't change the measuring point for that area, then the Maritime Welcome Center becomes 1-story, not 2-story. Which significantly affects the amount of facilities in that building. Peter, I see your hand up. Go ahead.
You know, I've studied the plans for the redevelopment at great length, and I have them in my office here at home. It doesn't look to me in any plans that the city dock isn't being raised up. They're raising up Susan B. Campbell Park and where the parking lot is. There's some different elevations, and then there's that flood wall. I would speculate that whoever wants this to happen is planning to develop a building that needs
It's sponsored by the mayor.
So, yeah, okay. So the mayor brought this up. So it doesn't make they're not changing the elevation of the businesses on Main Street on Dock Street that I know of. So it's an interesting topic, but we ought to be looking at the elevation changes of that whole redevelopment. And I think you did you invite Eileen Fogarty or someone to come and tell us what they're planning?
Not since I found out at 6 o'clock.
Yeah.
I just pulled up on my other screen. And it says buildings must comply with the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, floodplain management elevation requirement for AE flood zones are exempted from the requirement that no building shall be allowed to increase height because of an increase in the elevation of the front setback. So right now, if you increase the elevation of your front setback line that occurred after the imposition of the old code or the existing code, if you raised your elevation of your yard, you couldn't then build you couldn't start using that new elevation. So if you brought 2 feet of dirt into your front yard, you couldn't then measure your 28-foot height from your new 2 foot and go up and now be up 30 feet. And that's the code right now.
Yes.
And that applies throughout. Now, this, and I'm looking at this online, the exception is that buildings that must comply with with FEMA are exempt from that requirement. So the flip side of that is, and it says exempted structures will be measured from the new grade at the front setback line, not to exceed the flood protection elevation plus 1 foot. So buildings that fall into the FEMA floodplain management elevation do not get to measure from the new elevation as defined, and are not required, and are not, so they're exempt from the current code provision about not doing that.
Okay.
They're creating, this is creating an exception to the existing rule. From what I'm reading right now online, it creates an exception to the existing rule as opposed to creating a new rule across the board.
Well, I think there's a lot of information that we don't have.
I agree.
I hear you. Debbie, you're on mute.
I agree with that also, Peter. I think there's a lot of information, and it's been a changing plan, and it would be really helpful for us to understand what's going on.
I would encourage everyone to take a look at the 01523. It's available online. And in looking at it, I think that is I don't see that anything else is changed other than that exception. It's just that putting that exception in. So should be a short read, and I'm going to go back and read it too.
Yeah, I thought we had talked about asking Eileen to come in and talk to us, and
well, we did, and we had put it off because we'd put it off until after the opening of Hillman Garage in June.
that might be a little. I think that it would be good to have her come in as soon as possible, because I think that the mayor is planning to get started on the city dock plan very soon. And if we wait until,
I think it was the start. Peter, you correct me if I'm wrong. It's after the boat show at the earliest.
However, the planning and the design
Right.
will be fully complete shortly.
right,
So you can listen to what they have to say, but it won't matter what you think about it, because it's all going to be done. All the planning will be done. They're not going to revisit later. They're starting to wrap up the infrastructure below the ground in the weeks coming. In my opinion, that's the schedule that she has the designers on.
All right, I'll invite her to the June meeting, which is whatever it is, June something. Anybody else?
I haven't seen the plan, if I may go forward, Terry.
Sure.
As far as location goes, but in my opinion, a view shed from Main Street down to the harbor, anything that encumbers it is not a bonus to the city. And every time the subject comes up of building something down there, I cringe every time I walk down Main Street and look out at the harbor and think what the view shed could be if there was less there, if the Berdis house was gone and such. That's my opinion.
Burgess House isn't going.
but now they're talking about building this welcome center, which is going to be, I think, quite large next to the Berdis Center. So it will definitely impact the view shed. And
Well, I mean, I guess it goes back to the more basic question is, it's for that building, the quote welcome center, whatever you want to call it, is basically heads, showers to replace the building that's being torn down. And it seems
again, I think it will be helpful to find out exactly what is in that building, because I've heard all kinds of rumors about a restaurant being in it, an event center. I know, but we don't know. There's a lot that we don't know, as Peter said, and it would be helpful to understand. HA is actually doing a massing study to reflect what is being proposed so that people can understand what the view shed impact will be. That
We
should be
definitely don't know. Even city employees don't know. And we don't know where our teams can be located. And we've heard a multitude of things, many of which diminish our showers, our laundry, and our space than what we have now.
So
But
Beth,
go ahead.
the building that was, and I'm going back to, all the way back to the City Dock Action Committee, but maybe you know more, at least somewhat more than I recall. I call it the Maritime Welcome Center for lack of a better description. But as I understand, that building what is supposed to house bathroom facilities for both the visiting public from the land as well as visiting boaters from the water, shower facilities for visiting boaters from the water that get their chit and tie up a city dock or on a mooring, and whatever else. But at least it has to was supposed to have those two components. Is that still your understanding?
So I don't have a clear understanding, but what I do understand is that the problem came because the original plan was to keep the first level of the bathroom. So the original plan was to keep the bathrooms and knock the top of the building off at 1 Dock Street. And then there was some discussion about having a pump house adjacent to that.
You're talking about the current existing building.
Correct. And
Okay.
then when that plan changed, then everything had to fit in the Burtis house, including the current electrical system, which if you walk around City Dock and you look at the electrical system that's composed in the birdhouse, perhaps everything that's at the base of the Burtis dock, and then you think about the public restrooms and the boater bathrooms and the boater laundry and the room for my team of up to 30 some folks in the on-season time in a Maritime Welcome Center. There just isn't room for any of it. And when I've asked that question, I'm not sure. I'm sure I have confidence that people are having intelligent discussions about it, but I haven't been privy to that. So I'm concerned that it's possible that there are some people that don't know all the needs, that maybe need to know all the needs.
And now I'm probably more confused than usual. As I understood it from earlier discussions, I think even among the board or at the board, there's not enough room to put 10 pounds of stuff in a 5-pound bird's house.
Sure.
And so there was a need for an adjacent building, or another building, whether it was adjacent, whether it was the existing existing shower and bath facility. There's a need for a second building.
Yes, I agree with all of that. But when you really look at everything that's housed in my building and the power, which I'm told needs to be inside of a building, and the pump house, I don't know how that can all fit in the same footprint. And if we walk to the edge of the Burtis house and we move all the way to latitude 38, is that what it's called, latitude 38? And even if we pop out the back to improve those facilities or keep them as is, seems to me to be challenging. But I'm not an engineer. I could be entirely wrong. I'm just not sure everything's been considered.
When you say 238, are you talking about what were you talking about?
238. Did you mean 38 latitude?
Oh,
Latitude
latitude
38?
38.
Yeah. So think about the space that runs from the Burtis dock all the way to latitude 38.
Talking about the little parking lot, the empty space.
Yes, and even if you pop out the back of that, if we're trying to enclose the electrical systems, possibly a pump house, possibly a welcome center, harbor master office, a public restroom, a shower, and a laundry. And when I look at the diagrams that have been suggested, the services are being, they could be diminished when voting is growing. So I don't want to have only 6 bathrooms when there was 8. I don't think that's a good idea when the lines grow, when the buses come.
But, well, and I think, well, if you try, are you saying you could, it's not going to be practical to, well, it doesn't work if it's only a 1-story building?
I'm not sure how it works. But I just want to make sure that all the people that are the experts that are figuring this all out are realizing what all the needs are, because they're competing needs, right? So the field trip bus that needs to use the restroom has a different need than the wintertime storage boat that needs to do laundry. So these are competing needs, and I think it's my responsibility to make sure that someone's thought of all the competing needs. And they're making sure like it's a reasonable solution.
Okay. So we will invite Eileen to the June meeting. Hopefully it will not be on the same night as the grand opening of the parking garage, which it may well, if fate is any indicator, it'll fall exactly on the same night. But I'll extend that invitation, and we'll go from there. Anybody else? Is there a motion to adjourn? I saw Mr. Miller first, Mr. Duncan.
Terry,
Hood.
can I bring up one more thing?
Sure.
I apologize for the late hour, guys. And Terry, if I'm out of turn, then you just got to let me know. I kind of wanted to bring up the houseboat issue.
Oh. Do you have any more information than what you shared with me as to location, et cetera? Because I mean, there's more questions than there are answers at the moment, and it may be worth talking directly to Beth about it initially.
Absolutely. Just it's Butler's. I thought I would bring it up and just let everybody look at it. And
yeah, go ahead.
Maybe if it's worth it in the next meeting, we can share it. If not,
no, we definitely will do that. And but my only point is that we didn't have it on the agenda. So how much substantive discussion we can have is I'm nervous about a substantive discussion. But Al, shares basically what you shared with me earlier about it's a houseboat. I don't know where it was.
So it's a houseboat at Butler's. It's been brought up to me by 4 or 5 people, mainly because I used to live near there at the dock. And half
Can you tell me where Butler's?
It's
across from Davis. It's across from Davis.
Across from Davis's. So it's where the T-head docks used to be, but they turned them into regular docks.
I visited the boat today.
Yes. It's, again, I don't want to get deep into it. And I need to do some more research, but you know, if you want to look at encroachment, yeah, it's 15 foot out. We can share that another day, but I think it's a bigger issue just because I've spent a lot of time in Canada. And so I saw the houseboat invasion in Canada. You know, we had one at EYC and now we've got 2. This one's rather big. This one's owned.
Is it the Airbnb?
This one's owned by a pretty big company that rents it out. Again, Beth, you probably have this covered.
I don't have it covered. I learned about it yesterday. I visited it today. I think we do have some concerns here. I will be happy to investigate it and report out.
Okay.
I don't have all the answers, but it's on my radar. And I do think that your concern is valid.
Okay. Yeah, I just want to bring up everybody's radar. If you go to Davis's, you should look at it because I have seen this over the last 12 years in Canada. And once people make money on these things, then they just keep coming.
It grows. And I was surprised when I went by today that none of the neighbors have complained.
They have, to me.
Because it makes my job easier when I have a citizen complainant it makes it look like I'm not digging to be mean.
Okay, I'll bring it up. Again,
But
I
I-
apologize for the late notice. I just kind of wanted to bring it up because, again, I do spend a lot of time on Vancouver Island, and this is a huge issue there. And I did a little bit of research on the company, and they're already advertising it as a Airbnb and renting it out. And I have other reports that it's a private owner. So I don't know what the truth is, but I do think it is probably something we just need to decide or have an opinion on.
I think that's very valid, Alan. Thank you very much.
Yeah, good thing to put on my radar, but I'm on it and I'm interested.
Excellent.
All right. And I put it on the agenda for next time to just as a placeholder to make sure we address it and it's on the agenda, and then we can actually be more formal about it too. All right, now is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Kimberly, pick one. And Andy Fagley, who hasn't been moving much in the meetings for the last few months, he just made the motion. Debbie seconded.